Hi, this is my third attempt at a video, so I don't know what's going on with that tonight. Anyway, this is week 3, um, group 2, Jacqueline Adams' response. Our question was about agriculture in the workplace with White's article. On page 64, he explains that the workplace exposure to hazardous environmental hazards is generally more direct, continual, and concentrated to the poor and people of color. And in addition, those same groups of people get the worst jobs while being exposed to environmental hazards. And this is not only a problem in industry, but in agriculture, which I think plays a component in the food contamination section of White's article, which is later in the article. And when I think of agriculture, I think of the food that I consume on a daily basis. So when White points out on page 65 that agriculture is the third most dangerous occupation in the States, that really baffles me. The idea that our food is being created in a job that is the third most dangerous in the States. That really amazes me. He explains in addition to that Latino and African American immigrant workers are the ones that are most exposed to the greatest amount of pesticides. So that is obviously what is making this atmosphere dangerous, are pesticides. So I just don't understand this. The third most dangerous job in the United States is concerned with our food consumption. So we're putting these pesticides on so that they stay good longer, so that we can make more profit, and so that we can transfer the food further so they can make more profit. And when we're transferring that food with the pesticides on it, we have to utilize fossil fuels, oils, and gases, which again pollute the environment and make it more hazardous to our health. That amazes me. The third most dangerous job in the United States is concerned with the creation of our food. I would think it would be the most rewarding position to be in agriculture, being outside, connecting with nature. This goes back to Leopold's article. The idea that we have this ability to give and take away from nature, and it seems that we're just taking in this sense, and that really kind of baffles me. So in addition to talking about agriculture and the exposure, the reason that African Americans and Latino Americans and people of color and the poor end up with these jobs that are more dangerous is because they are living in areas where environmental hazards are created, where environmental hazards are put closest to them, and their living areas, what does he say, where we live, play, and learn. And I don't think White does a good enough historical job of referencing why these communities exist in the first place. He tells us that they live in these communities, that they're in these communities, and he kind of touches on it, but he doesn't touch on it enough. I don't think he addresses that these segregated communities occurred as far back as the first time we had transatlantic, slave trade. Segregated communities separating, people of color, white people, poor people, wealthy people. Communities have been divided like this for a long term, for a long time. And the fact that he doesn't address that, the fact that he doesn't address redlining districts within the 1940s and 50s that contribute to this. I mean, whenever you have this foundational situation of, that is what's sustainable about this situation, that people of color and the poor continually are put in the same area, and that perpetuates the issue. I think he fails to touch on that a little bit. I mean, he does, but not to the extent that I felt that he should. Moving on, our second question was about addressing the difference in sustainable environments versus radicalism in Book Chen's article. On page 318, Book Chen defines what is an ecological society when he or she writes, An ecological society would fully recognize that the human animal is biologically structured to live with its kind and to care for and love its own kind within a broadly and freely defined social group. From that point on to page 324, Bookchin kind of expands on the definition of what is an ecological society. Um, and this idea that an ecological society should be free and that we should include imagination is touched on page 324. Bookchin writes on page 324, the historic transcendence is no longer a question of reason and power as such, but the function of imagination in giving us direction, hope, and a sense of place in nature and society. This is the main difference, I think, that he is trying to make, that radicalism is separate from sustainable societies. He recommends that radicalism and sustainability, let me catch my spot here. Oh, that radicalists relied heavily on economic and scientific progress, which reflected those ideals associated with libertarian and authoritarian socialisms, as stated on page 325. The greatest difference in utopian sustainability and radicalism can be again seen on page 325 when he writes, imagination as a socially creative power found its voice not in prevalent radical social engineers of the 19th century, but in the rare luminescent utopian works that flashed annoyingly around scientific socialists of all kinds. This reading was very dense, but he did have some moments of humor, like that one, flashed annoyingly around scientific socialists. The idea that they were measuring progress with economic achievement, I think, is Bookchin's point, that radicalists do measure progress in that fashion. Frankly, I'm not sure I can agree with him entirely. I think for a society to be sustainable, particularly in a capitalist society where the economy does kind of act as a figure of relevance, we have to combine the idea of progress being measured not only with imagination and with autonomous individuals, but with economic achievement as well. Okay, so this is my third video. I hope this one works. Thanks. Bye.